Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank IFAC and the CND-CSE, our host here in Italy, for the invitation to have me speak about the translation issue and how we see this at FEE. First of all, I would like to tell you in very brief terms what FEE stands for. FEE is the French abbreviation of La Fédération des Experts Comptables, but widely known in English as the Federation of European Accountants. And FEE federates professional institutes across Europe, in fact 47 of them in total. It's almost a third of IFAC's membership that is also represented at FEE. They are representing 36 European countries, including all 28 European Union countries. And behind our member bodies that are professional institutes, there are obviously individuals, practitioners, and there are 800,000 of them, including all sections of the profession. And what FEE does for our members is to represent the profession towards the European and international regulators, standard setters, and other stakeholders, so to advance the interests of our European profession. I will say a few words about FEE and translation, IFRS and translation from the European perspective, then the European Commission and translation, and finally ISA translation in Europe. And first, a few words, as Kelly already partly indicated, why we believe at FEE translation is very important. Not only does the European Union represent effectively 24 official languages, the FEE member bodies in total have 29 different languages in which they work. And for the FEE member bodies, that means that most of their members, those 800,000 professionals that are their members, they do not work in English. They work in one of those 29 languages in their mother tongue, in their work, but also in their relationships with their clients. Now, if we look at the European Union and the 24 languages, that is very important because more and more in our profession on accounting, on auditing, but also on other matters, the legislation is set on the European level, no longer on the national level. And when this is happening, all those standards that they would adopt, for instance, IFRS or hopefully pretty soon ISAs, this means that all those standards need to be translated officially in the 24 languages of the European Union. So languages and translation of standards, it's inherent to the European Union. At FEE, we have a lot of work that we do, but unfortunately for most of our members maybe, we only do this in English. We can't translate it and we don't have the staff nor the budget to do that. So that's why we have a fee policy on translation. And just very quickly, what that means, we actually, when a member body is interested to use our work on national level for their members, we ask them to have a fee asked for prior authorization to do translation, that they acknowledge the fee translation policy in the translated work. They do the translation on their responsibility and cost, and we also ask them to refer in the translation to the original in English, for which fee has authorship and copyrights. And this is actually often done. We have quite some requests from our member bodies to translate our work, and we see this as an excellent way to actually maximize the dissemination of the fee work within actually our profession throughout Europe. I would also like to say a few words now on translation and then get into standards. And the first matter I would like to refer to is the translation of IFRS by the IFRS Foundation. And that's not European, that's the general IFRS translation policy, because Kelly, she obviously looks at this from the IFAC point of view, and that's all about standards, but for Europe, and I'm sure for many other countries, the translation of IFRS, of International Financial Reporting Standards, is quite important as well. And that's why I wanted to look into that and see if there were any parallels or any differences. And so when I started to look into this, like Kelly already indicated, there were a few buzzwords and that are really key in translation that came back all the time. And I reworded them as collaboration, quality and review, and acceptability of the translation, and how the IFRS Foundation does this for their standards. As far as collaboration, it's demand-driven. They don't do in-house translations, but they work together with translating bodies like IFAC to have their standards translated by them. As far as quality and review, they really stress professional translations. For them, this means, as Kelly also indicated, the use of computer-assisted translation software. They insist on having the entire standard translated and not just a part of it, and also to have specific attention for selected key terms throughout the translation and have those consistently used throughout translation. But as far as review and to make sure the quality is of the highest possible level, they also insist on having an expert committee review by native IFRS experts that actually look at the translation which was done previously by the software or in another way. And as far as acceptability for the IFRS Foundation, what is key to them is that there is one standard or one translation per language, and they often have similar processes as far as copyrights and as far as agreements are concerned, as IFAC has, especially when it comes down to the adoption of the IFRS, which is done in very many countries. So there are those agreements with jurisdictions to waive copyrights and to allow free distribution of the translated standards. Now, that's what the IFRS does worldwide, but as IFRS are used in the European Union, I also looked into how the European Commission goes about translation, and if, for instance, they use those translations by the IFRS foundations. And when I started to look into that, I came to the conclusion that within the European Commission, which is basically those over 30,000 civil servants that are the ones that initiate the legislation and the regulation in Europe. It is the European Parliament and the European member states that will decide, so it's the three institutions that work together. But as far as translation, it's clearly the European Commission which is the driving force. And when I looked at this, they had no one-size-fits-all approach, for instance, for IFRS or for ISAs. It's one given for the adoption of any standards in the European Union. There is a need for translation from English to the 23 European languages. That's a must. But how they do this, they have their own service, DG Translation, Directorate General Translation, it's called in full, and it's one of the major sections within the Commission. Their involvement is required, even if there is an IFRS Foundation translation of standards. And this DG translation consists of 6,000 linguists and interpreters. 3,000 are permanent staff, 3,000 are almost permanent freelancers. And that makes up 20%, almost 20% of the European Commission's staff. That is absolutely huge, because one would never think that translation would take such a big bit of the staff and the budget of an organization like the European Commission. But often what you find, as they are linguists, oftentimes they do not have a specific subject matter expert or expertise. In our areas, accounting and auditing, that is particularly important. So this might be an issue that needs consideration. And oftentimes they work under time pressure because for adoption of standards within the European Union, there are set time frames. Normally it's a maximum of 3 months, and there is only so much material that you can translate in a certain period. So that's the main issues they are struggling with. If we then look at why this is important, that is because in 2002 there was a very important IAS regulation issued and adopted in the European Union, which actually requires the adoption of IFRS in the 24 European languages, because this regulation decided that for consolidated accounts of listed entities, IFRS would be the financial reporting standards to be used throughout the European Union. So they needed those translations. Those translations are until now performed by the Commission, by the DG Translation, and they up to now have no formal review by experts done, and they also have no formal cooperation with the IFRS Foundation, although the IFRS Foundation makes available to DG Translation their translations if they have them in a particular language. So when we look at that, there are a number of issues that unfortunately we have to note. And as far as, again, the 3 buzzwords are concerned, when we look at collaboration, as there is no formal relationship between the IFRS Foundation and the DG Translation of the European Commission, there might be a duplication of work done there. As far as quality and review, luckily they use computer-assisted software, but what they especially lack is a formal review by experts. There is only a voluntary review done by some member states, by their officials that have a particular interest in the quality of the translation and the quality of the standards that will be used in their member state. So as far as acceptability, what we have to note is that for the moment, for 7 of the 24 European Union languages, there are at least 2 different IFRS translated versions, and that's actually for all the major languages, for French, for German, for Spanish, also for Polish. That is currently the case, and these are up-to-date translations. There are some that are less recent, but that is for current ones. And what is noted in practice that preparers, companies, but also accountants, practitioners, they often, because of the differences in translation, they will revert back to the original IFRS in English, and obviously that could not have been the purpose from such an exercise. Now, when we look at that and then we look at the next step that is most probably going to happen in Europe, it's the adoption of ISA's International Standards on Auditing, and then the need for their translation. So there might be some lessons that can be learned from this, and hopefully avoid to have similar issues for ISAs in the future. And when we look at the translation of ISAs, actually there has already been some work done on that in the European Union. There is a audit directive from 2006 that initiated that, and therefore the 2009 clarified ISAs were translated. Unfortunately, that directive created the opportunity for the European Commission to adopt the ISAs, but they actually never did in reality. So that translation has been made, but it has only been used to a certain extent and not for official adoption. And how this was done was very much following the process that Kelly explained. There was here effective collaboration between different parties. There was an agreement between IFAC and the translating body, although the beneficiary of the translation is supposed to be the European Commission. As far as quality and review, the translation was made, and then DG Translation was checking the consistency and of terminology and other matters. So there was some quality check done, sometimes also already by the translating body itself. And as far as acceptability, there was therefore one translation, but unfortunately it is out of date right now because, as you will know, many of the clarified ISAs have been slightly revised, or there have been also new standards added. And for us in Europe, it is important to look at this again, because a few months ago, before the summer, a updated audit directive and actually also an audit regulation now has been adopted or accepted by the European Commission. And there are requirements on the European Commission to finally adopt the ISAs. So we hope they will do this as soon as possible. And for the European Commission to do that, they will need up-to-date translations of all the ISAs. So what can we learn from that, and how can we actually avoid some translation issues when the adoption of ISAs is really going to happen in the European Union? We really believe that as far as collaboration, this tripartite collaboration should be reinstated, whereby there are translation agreements between IFAC and a translating body for the benefit of the European Union, and not necessarily have only DG Translation do the work, which has in the past led to delays. As far as quality and review, we really believe that there is the need for the involvement of experts and a formal review that might be done by DG Translation, that might be done by national competent authorities. There are different options, and we also believe that it is important that there is adequate funding for the translations in order for the need for continuing translation to be sustainable. Because if we look at it for the moment between IFRS and ISAs, as far as translation is concerned, there wasn't really a level playing field. The Commission fully funded, or did themselves perform the translation of IFRS, but for ISAs it was actually done by translating bodies, and on the cost of translating bodies, which are often member bodies of IFAC and FEE. So this will need to be considered. And as far as acceptability, obviously it is very important that different language versions of one and the same standard of ISAs should be avoided. So I would like to conclude my presentation with, sorry, this one too fast, with a few views of FEE member bodies, or suggestions of FEE member bodies to move translations forward. And these are, I would say, general messages. I think a lot of the FEE member bodies that do translations, they really appreciate clarity and consistency in the use of terminology, understandable language, for instance, shorter sentences. English has the tendency to have very long sentences, and to have flexibility in the form of translation, not the substance, but the form. But most of all, they really look for a stable platform of standards to avoid quite prohibitive retranslation and reissuance cost, especially for smaller member bodies. And that is also linked with funding, and this is what they think is the most important thing that they would like standard setters to reflect on when they issue and reissue and revise standards. Sometimes just a little tinkering, not a massive change. So that's what I wanted to give you this afternoon. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you IBERAM, beginning with our business card. We are an international working group, officially born in 2012, but with deep roots in some significant projects and friendship developed some years ago. Our main aim is to obtain single English to Spanish translations of the IFAC standards and pronouncements. But the truth is that we are reaching another significant results. While working on translations, we are improving our relationship and the knowledge of accountants and audit associations in other countries. From this point of view, I can assure you that translation can be a great way to improve cooperation among IFAC members and even with IFAC. I don't know how many 100 million people speak Spanish, maybe 400 or 500. So, as English, Spanish is not anymore property of the Spanish citizens. We are a world asset that is mainly managed in 4 regions, in North, in Central, and in South America, and in Spain. Although there are another important reasons, it was to address this reality that each one of these regions has a representative as a leader of IBERAM. This fact, plus the cooperation with other significant institutions as the Ibero-American Association of Accountants, give us 2 important things. The right to feel a significant institution in the Latin American audit world, and a privileged situation to understand the translations demand of the area. As other professions, accountants and auditors are facing not one but many crises. Almost 200,000 speaking Spanish professionals are facing this crisis. I guess there are many ways to face them, but I'm sure that all of them may take them to higher quality services. Nowadays, in accountancy, there are no quality services without adoption of standards. And there is no adoption of standards without good translations. IBERAM was born because some years ago, as Kelly used to say, we had no good translations. We had a lot of translations, but not the good one. When I began working with IBERAM, I thought a good translation was just a published document with accurate definitions and with high professional standards. But I was wrong. It must fulfill another important characteristics. For example, it must be the one adopted by the authorities. It must be the one published by the main publishers, and it must be the one appointed by the universities. Now, I think we are close to these good translations with the right one. I have talked about these single faithful translations and about high professional standards. But in IBERAM, we believe we must work in 2 more targets: up-to-date translations and widely accessible translations. The truth is we have achieved the other 2 targets, and now we are emphasizing in the last 2. We could talk long about it, but we do not have time enough. But I can assure you that a project like IBERAM needs a natural evolution. We are close to reach the other targets, but we are still working in this, in updating and widely accessible documents. As any other significant project, you can achieve these objectives in long terms without strong principles. We are working with a strict regard to the three principles you can watch at these slides. When we talk about public interest, we mean that we do not work on a firm demand. We work on the whole professional interest with a special awareness of young people, on less developed economies, and in the most important, in the most strategic IFAC documents. As in Spain, we are obliged to negotiate the standards with our supervisor. Lucky countries, those who hasten to deal with this. The public interest for us also means our supervisor giving the green light to these translations. Public interest is connected to widely accessible translations, the last target I mentioned. Well, we all know that nowadays with internet, distribution is not a problem anymore. So the key point on this item are cost and are prices, and are directly related to the next significant principle in IBERAM, sustainability. Yes, it's obvious, we could work for free, but it wouldn't be fair with the Mexican, Argentinian, and Spanish members of the associations that are partnered in IBERAM. Translating is a very expensive activity, especially in the early stages of the project like IBERAM. We cannot afford giving such a present to other professionals because most of them are competing with Mexican, Argentinians, and Spanish professionals. Some people like to say that we are non-profit organizations. I do not agree with this definition. We do help our professionals to earn money, so we are not profitable, but we need to work on profit, on our professionals' profit. But on the other hand, we can't forget this public interest I talk about. So we must find the equilibrium. Looking for it, we have reached significant agreements among the IBERAM partners. We have decided to distribute the same proportion of the money we generate among the four main partners, as we do with the task, as we do with work. This makes everything easier. And then we are working on agreements with governments and with the bigger firms. With these agreements, we are trying to sell them the translations rights. You know that the intellectual rights are owned by IFAC, but the translations rights are owned by IFAC and by the rest of the IBERAM members. By marketing translations rights, we will be able to be sustainable. We won't get the whole amount of money invested back, but it will give us this opportunity. The other principle I wanted to talk about is cooperation. As you could read at the beginning of our presentation, our slogan is, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." And let me add, because of cooperation. Cooperation implies different matters. I would like to emphasize in two of them. First, we have the best professionals. If they work isolated, they would get worse results than if they work as a team. But cooperation also means empathy. It is amazing how in this globalized world, with so many common cultural items, we are so different. We love it, but we are really different. For example, or government structure. In some associations, presidents and the board of directors changes every year. In Spain, we change every 4 years. This means different cultures, different roles. The presidents and the boards have different roles. And we must manage it. We manage it with empathy. Another difference, I talked before, in Spain we need the green light from the supervisor. In other countries, they do not need. But they have the patience to manage this. We slow all the process, but they help us with their empathy. For example, another one difference, the legal status of associations. It affects the way they can receive revenues and the way they can pay. Without a real determination to fix this difference, we could be paralyzed. So empathy is the right experience and the way to cooperation. I have mentioned our main political challenges. Later I will talk about the technical ones. But before, I would like to brief you on our corporate government system because it is the tool to solve and to prevent the political problems. We have created 2 committees that work close and with high level of coordination. The executive committee, it is our board of directors. And I think it's quite important that although there are voting members and non-voting members, we never vote. Mainly because we know that maybe the first day we vote will be the last. The other committee is the review committee. It is a technical body, our engine room. Our rep committee has developed one of the most significant assets we have, an efficient translation and revision process. Although almost all Spanish-speaking countries have delegates in the review committee, and the 3 review teams consist of skilled auditors, I must mention 2 members of this review committee. Guillermo Español, I love this name because it means William the Spanish. I guess he was born to work in Iberam. And Adela Vila, she is the head of the international department at the Spanish Association. She's here, and I think she is delighted to help you. Do not hesitate to contact her if you have any technical problem with translations. RepCom has spent a lot of time working on our main technical challenges, which are workload and how to squeeze our limited resources, the compliance of the translated glossary of terms. This is a must in any translation work. English, French, like Spanish, are talked around the world in different ways. The most typical and embarrassing example of the difference are those words that, when crossed the Atlantic became bad words. In auditory, we don't have bad words, but we have some terminologies that are not understood in one side or in another side of the Atlantic, or that can be misunderstood as bad quality documents. So this compliance is absolutely essential, and we are spending a lot of time to keep it well-fitted. Another technical challenge we have to deal with are translating memories. We have no time to analyze this problem, and I guess Rita will talk about it, but this is also essential, and it has been, to manage these memories, has been one of the big problems that we have faced some months ago. I won't talk about processes. You can watch the resume, the draft of our processes. I guess also Rita will talk about them. But I would like to focus on two ideas about processes. We deal with so many documents, we are so many people, there are so many versions, that only with a good and well-known applicable process we will survive. And second, people believe engineers are good accountants. I can assure you that our accountants have designed an engineering masterpiece. As I told you before, we maintain a natural evolution. The slides before showed you the whole translation process, but it is unfinished. We are still working on the designing of our processes. We are still improving our publication delivery process. I guess in the future, the process slides will have one or two more steps. This has produced, the problem with the publication process have produced some delays we have suffered in the last months, and we are trying to solve. These slides show you our main milestones. The important thing is that we are trying to translate and to publish all the significant, all the standards, all the important documents that IFAC publishes. If we are able to face all the challenges I have tried to explain, I am sure that we'll be able to reach this aim, this important challenge. I am sure, and let me finish with this idea, that maybe is the simplest idea that you will hear in this Congress, that we have a little secret. In my country, and in most of these century societies, when we vote for political parties, when we are looking for a new CFO, when we vote for the board of directors of our associations, we usually forget one thing. We check for the professional skills, we look for their school awards, and for the typical information a curriculum vitae contains. But we do not think in the most simple thing. Is this a good guy? Is this a honest guy? It is simple, cheap, and a guarantee of quality. Imagine if we use it when we vote for our politicians. In Iberam, I can assure you, we are good people, honest people. Good people, honest people makes the good projects happen. I am proud to say that we are good people, honest people, and with the highest professional skills. Thank you very much.